Welcome to What We Witnessed. I'm your guy, I'm your host, I'm your bro, Javondre Cole, and let's just see what episode 4 has in store. Now, first and foremost, I like to say wherever you are tuning in from, whether it be from my LinkedIn newsletter, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Pocket Cast, I appreciate the support. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get down to business. History repeats itself 10 years later after the Ohio State Buckeyes beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish 34 to 23 in the college football playoffs. Back in 2014, it was the first year of the 14 playoff expansion, which Urban Myers, Ezekiel Elliott, and Cordell Jones ended up winning that first title. And 10 years later, here we are. It's the first time that we've seen the 12-team playoff bracket format in which Ryan Day, Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith and company have come out on top. It was a pretty decent game overall. Will Howard, he was the college football playoff MVP. Ended the game with 231 passing yards and 57 rushing yards. Threw for 2 touchdowns in that game as well. Quinshon Judkins went for the hat trick for that game, scoring 3 touchdowns and rushing for 121 yards in the win. And this helped Ohio State capture their seventh national title in school history. But and then we did see a lot of that gritty play from Riley Leonard of Notre Dame, the quarterback. He accounted for nearly 300 total yards of offense, along with 3 scores in that game, 2 through the air and 1 on the ground. From what I've seen, there was a lot of Leonard left and Leonard right in this game as he carried the ball 17 times. He led the team in rushing yards on the night, so the will was there, but the win was not. So as we look ahead to next season, the Texas Longhorns are the early favorites to win the national title, followed by Ohio State second, Georgia third, Oregon fourth, and Penn State fifth to win it all next year. Now, heading to the NFL. Ben Johnson has been hired as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. The former offensive coordinator of the Lions is heading to the division rivals to help revamp Caleb Williams' experience in the NFL with the Bears. Kind of funny how a few weeks back, fans may know that there was a viral story where Caleb Williams was prank called by a fan who was impersonating Ben Johnson. He joked about the interaction on the St. Brown podcast and told his side of the story. But here we are a couple weeks later, and the tandem is a reality and not just a prank call. I think this is a wonderful opportunity that Johnson has at hand, has some young pieces, has a pretty great offense, and as an offensive-minded coach, he has a lot of great pieces to work with over there, and having an asset like Ben Johnson departing will hurt the offense next year, so I don't think we'll see as many fireworks as we did see this year from the Lions offense, but not only will the offense suffer a bit of a loss, but also the defense, as Detroit's the former defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, has accepted the role to become the next head coach of the New York Jets. Now, Aaron Glenn, he has some skin in the game with the Jets. He was a former player for New York. He played there as a former first-round pick from 1994 to 2001 in the Big Apple, and he also spent some time as a member of the Jets front office personnel in 2012 and 2013. So his ties run deep to the gang green. So his ties to the Jets run deep. Glenn was the defensive coordinator in Detroit since 2021. So Detroit will lose their top offensive play caller and their top defensive play caller. So we can expect to see a bit of an adjustment in the Motor City next year. So just be prepared for some growing pains, I would say, in Detroit. Robert Saleh this week is heading back to the Bay once again, and he will become the defensive coordinator for the 49ers for a second time. Last year, Robert spent time as a consultant with the Green Bay Packers. So another coaching position has been filled as the carousel continues. Now, our final head coach landing announcement resides in Sin City, as the former Seattle Seahawks head coach and executive VP, Pete Carroll, has agreed to terms to become the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Carroll's time in the Pacific Northwest was unforgettable. He led the Legion of Boom to a Super Bowl championship, had an overall record of 170, 120, and 1. So that was 170 wins, 120 losses, and 1 tie in Seattle. Pete will enter next season as the oldest head coach in the league at 74 years old, and he will have a tall task ahead of him. Raiders hold the number 6 pick in this year's NFL draft, and can really use a lot of help everywhere, essentially, outside of Max Crosby and Brock Bowers. Moving right on to Cole's quick hits. This week, the NFL honors teams were announced for all of the major statistical awards for the year. We have for the most valuable player, of course, it is headlined by Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen in the field. Of course, I still have Jackson taking that trophy. AP Defensive Player of the Year. A lot of the big names that we're accustomed to: T.J. Watt, Miles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, Pat Surtain. But one that we may have never seen prior to this season, Zach Bond, Philadelphia Eagles linebacker, who is currently on a 1 year, $3.5 million contract. And that's pretty interesting because of the field. He's obviously underpaid for his position, but somebody who's a finalist for a Defensive Player of the Year award. We can expect that this 1 year contract will expire, and there will be a lot of teams calling for his services. So if Philly doesn't get an offer to him, the one that's lucrative and one that is favorable, you can probably see this as Zach Bond's one and done season in Philly. But that's definitely an interesting story, and I find that pretty cool. Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley headlines this team. I think he'll take it pretty easily. He was 100 yards or give or take shy of Eric Dickerson's rushing record, so I think he'll take that award home. AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. We have three former teammates, actually, in Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr., all former LSU Tigers, just last season. And now it's clear that they've already been making significant strides for their respective organizations. So it's pretty cool to see teammates turn finalists for an Offensive Rookie of the Year award. So, but I think that will be Jaden Daniels' award as well, right there. And Defensive Rookie of the Year, we have two Eagles, Cooper DeJean as well as Quinyon Mitchell, both in the secondary for Philly. So a lot of young pieces over there, and that's something that you can definitely hang your hat on. Philly is the number one defense coming into this week in the NFL, so it's pretty nice that you can see there's going to be some future and Defensive Rookie of the Year, we have a couple of teams that represent these five-team finalists. And for the Eagles, we have Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, both rookies in that secondary for the Eagles. So it's fair to say that the future of the no-fly zone is in pretty good hands in Philadelphia. As far as the Rams, they also have two players for finalists: Braden Fisk, the DA, the edge rusher for the Rams, as well as Jared Verse, the Rams linebacker who I mentioned a little bit in last week's episode. And Chop Robinson of the Miami Dolphins, the linebacker, he finalizes the group and rounds out that top five. AP Comeback Player of the Year. Now, usually this award goes to people who coming back from significant injuries and making their stamp on the game. So Joe Burrow, of course, we know he led the league in passing yards and passing touchdown this year, so he pretty much may secure that role. But I have seen things such as Sam Darnold could be a potential sneak win. Now, granted, he hasn't been a comeback from an injury. It's more so just been his career was transcending in a different direction until he had his prove it deal with the Minnesota Vikings this year. So a lot of controversy there. So we'll see how that race ends up. And rounding that out is, of course, J.K. Dobbins, the running back for the Chargers, who we know was initially in Baltimore, was dealing with significant knee injuries coming out of Ohio State. So he had a pretty good breakthrough season, had a couple of 150-yard rushing games this year. So he definitely had a great coming out party early on in the year. And then we have Christian Gonzalez as well as DeMar Hamlin for that race. And Coach of the Year, we have headlining that group, we'll say Dan Campbell, the Detroit Lions head coach. Kevin O'Connell did a significant turnaround in Minnesota for the Vikings. Sean Payton, head coach of the Denver Broncos. Dan Quinn for the Washington Commanders, as well as Big Red Andy Reid for the Kansas City Chiefs. Lastly, we have the Assistant Coach of the Year race, which is rounded out by Joe Brady, the Buffalo Bills OC. Vic Fangio, Philadelphia's defensive coordinator. Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator. And then both Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions, respectively, the DC and the OC. Now, the NFL honors will be aired on Thursday, February 6th, where all of these major awards will be announced. So we will look forward to see the outcome. And then lastly, we have the NBA All-Star starters have been announced. For the Eastern Conference, we have Jalen Brunson representing the Knicks, Donovan Mitchell of the Cavs, Karl Anthony Towns, first-year Knick, will also be in the starting lineup for New York. Jason Tatum, reigning NBA champion of the Boston Celtics, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was the leading vote getter for the Eastern Conference. Coming out of the West, we have the front runner in MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, SGA from OKC. Chef Curry will be in the lineup as well. Nikola Jokic, who was the top vote getter for the Western Conference, and then we have Kevin Durant, and lastly the King, LeBron James himself. It's kind of crazy. I seen a graphic the other day when it was showing how Stephen Curry, LeBron, and KD all were All-Star starters in the 2014 NBA All-Star games, and now 11 years later, history is repeating itself. So it just shows you their longevity to the game and how they've been able to be key contributors to the NBA. Now we've always had conflict and back and forth about the All Star game is boring. There has been some competitive issues in the previous years, but it looks like this year the NBA is deciding to switch it up, and I'm getting this straight off of NBA.com. But there's going to be a new format for this year's All Star game. It will feature a mini tournament with 4 teams in 3 games. 2 teams will meet in one semifinal, and the remaining 2 teams will meet in the other semifinal. The winning teams from game 1 and 2 will advance to face each other in the championship game. And then for each game, the winner will be the first team to reach or surpass 40 points. Now, each team will be divided into 8 players, and they will be head coached by current NBA TNT analysts, Team Chuck, Team Shaq, Team Kenny, as well as Team Candace. So pretty much how this is going to go is the 3 analysts will make their respective picks live on TNT, and that'll be conducted on February 6th as well as the NFL honors, just before the network's doubleheader that night. So of course we know who the starters are, but once the reserves are announced, then these teams, or then these Team Chuck, Team Shaq, and Team Kenny will choose their 8 players. And then the 4th team, and that'll be led by Team Candace. They'll be the winning team of the Castro Rising Stars game, which we know is obviously like the best rookies versus the best sophomores in the league. And also NBA G League standouts, they'll also be represented in that game. So that game will be played on February 14th for the Rising Stars, and the winner of that will be entered into the competition for this new All-Star format. So what's in it for the winners? Obviously, the 4 teams participating in the NBA All-Star Game will compete for a prize pool of $1.8 million. So each player on the championship winning team will receive $125 grand. Each player on the second place team will receive $50,000, and each player on the third and fourth place team will receive $25,000. I'm not mad at the concept. I think it's just transcending in a new direction, trying new things out under Adam Silver. So well, I'm excited for this. I think this will be a pretty good thing. It'll bring that competitive juice back. This is something else that's kind of similar to the in-season tournament, just to kind of keep games competitive and keep fans engaged. So I think this is a step in the right direction. So I actually like this move. I'm a fan of this. So I hope it turns out to be a really, really solid game. So we'll see. So look forward to that game kicking off on February 16th at the Chase Center in San Francisco. Short and sweet and to the point this week. But as always, I appreciate you all for tuning in. As we wrap, the Eagles are demolishing the Commanders 34-15 in the third quarter. So I guess my close game prediction will not be true. But what is true is that my assumption that the Eagles would prevail did come to fruition. So it looks like Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and company are headed to their second Super Bowl in 3 seasons, as they will await the winner of the Chiefs and the Bills later on. And that is all for episode 4 of What We've Witnessed. As always, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with a fellow sports junkie who loves sports just as much as you and I. Until next time, so long, friends, and enjoy a great week.